Now that I've seen Dark Phoenix, I've seen all 12 of the current X-Men movies, so that means it's time to rank them worst to best. How would you rank all 12 X-Men movies? Let's do that in the comments. Welcome to Durbania, I'm Durbin, and this is my ranking of all 12 X-Men movies, worst to best. I went online and just did a quick double check to make sure it was indeed 12 X-Men movies and that I wasn't missing one, and Google told me there was 13. I was like, what? How are there 13? So I looked it up, and New Mutants was one of them. We have no idea when that movie is ever truly going to come out. Sure, they say 2020. Is it really going to come out then? We'll just have to wait till we get there. But for now, there are 12 X-Men movies, and it is time to rank them worst to best. I will be dropping some spoilers for Dark Phoenix, so you know that's coming up. How would you rank these 12 movies? Let's do that in the comments. Number 12. X-Men Origins Wolverine. I feel like this entire franchise is retroactively trying to reject this movie just like the body rejects a bad infection. Now, when you dive into this X-Men franchise, never have I seen a franchise of films with so bad a continuity. I mean, even at the best of times where it wants to acknowledge the other movies that exist in this franchise, it has horrifying continuity. But I feel like of all the movies in this franchise, this X-Men series of movies badly wants us all to ignore and reject X-Men Origins Wolverine. So you know what? I'm going to grant its request and put it here in my last place because it is crazy the amount of stuff that this movie, has in it that every movie after it just tries to retcon and retroactively fix and say, that didn't happen. Please ignore that movie. I mean, the first and most obvious thing is Deadpool. And the biggest thing that I always kind of struggled with until the revelation finally hit me watching these movies in chronological order was the whole thing with Stryker. Because you see, in this film, it was like 1973 or the end of the Vietnam War. Sabretooth and Wolverine were there in Vietnam. And Stryker, probably in his early 40s, shows up to take them to be part of his task force to find adamantium, right? Well, then you get into Days of Future Past, and this is before the timeline is reset. This is before time travel actually changes things. Wolverine was not in Vietnam, he was in New York City. And in Vietnam, there was a Stryker in probably his early 30s there to pick up the other group of mutants that was there. And so they utterly have ignored that entire continuity and that entire story. And when I look at this whole franchise seeking that badly to retcon this movie so much, of course it has to be in my last place. Number 11. X-Men The Last Stand. You know where Jesus said, a house divided against itself cannot stand? That is the movie The Last Stand. This movie and its plot is divided against itself and it cannot stand. It wants to be a story about the mutant cure. It wants to be a story involving the Phoenix and the Phoenix Saga. But because it doesn't know what it wants to be, and it felt like maybe they were in a hurry when they were putting this movie together and trying to get it out as fast as possible, you could definitely tell there was a director change in the midst of production that we went from Bryan Singer to Brett Ratner, and so you could definitely feel that this movie suffered from whatever was going on behind the scenes. I mean, that scene where Wolverine has to kill Jean Grey, the woman that he loves, in order to save the world, and as he's approaching her, and the Phoenix power is like dissolving everything, and he is healing as fast as he's dissolving, and he has to kill her. How epic of a moment that should have been. But it wasn't. The whole of that movie was divided on what it actually wanted to be about, and so it just couldn't build itself to those epic moments. And another big problem with The Last Stand, Charles Xavier, it bugs me that he gets disintegrated by the Phoenix. He throws his consciousness into somebody else's body, and all the movies afterwards refuse to acknowledge that.
You're not the only one with gifts.
No, he could have said, yeah, I'm sorry, I threw my consciousness into another body, and with my mind powers, I'm projecting the image that you recognize of me because I'm ashamed of what I've done. Like, they could have explained it that way, and just that short of a time. Did they? No. And it bugs me. The continuity bugs me. That is a big thing, and they're acknowledging the existence of The Last Stand, but they're not acknowledging one of the biggest plot points that flippin' happened in that movie. Ugh. Number 10, Dark Phoenix. I mean, I liked Dark Phoenix. I was entertained. And like I said in my review, I think it's worth checking out on the big screen. I thought it was entertaining. But you know what it wasn't? It wasn't a satisfying end to the X-Men franchise for it being the last movie in that franchise. I mean, the first thing is this, the way it ended, where you had Jean evolving to not needing to live on the planet or whatever, and you have that shot of her as the Phoenix in the sky as, you know, we're in Paris and the camera slowly panning up. It's like, okay, that's interesting. But the way it ended, you have her gone, you have Charles who retired, so he's no longer the headmaster, and Beast is the headmaster of the school, you know, the Jean Grey school. So it's like, okay, that's interesting. But you see, when Days of Future Past ends, Charles is the headmaster, Jean Grey is there, Scott is there, Beast is there, everybody is there, including Logan. Now, it's not to say it couldn't all fall together that way. Of course, Jean could return and all of that stuff. But if this movie was supposed to be like the ending, and I kind of thought they reshot things to make it an ending because they're not going to make any more, it's not an ending. It leaves this huge gap that we can only fill in with our imaginations. How did everything fall back into place where it did for Days of Future Past so that we can move forward into the movie Logan? It's, again, the annoying continuity problems that this franchise has for me. It just bugs the living snot out of me, and I don't like the huge gap that this thing ended with. The other thing that kind of bugs me is Charles. So he's full of himself. He won't admit his wrongs. He later admits his wrongs, and he repents. Now, the problem is, I left the movie with the impression he was still full of himself, because it felt like it was all going through the motions. It didn't feel like that emotional transformation when he finally admitted his wrongs. It just felt like it was going through the motions, and we didn't get a genuine transformation in the character, which James McAvoy is a fantastic actor, so I don't know if that's a product of reshoots, confusion on the actors' parts, or whatever, but it just, even though the plot points were there of his character transformation, I didn't feel it, and so it kind of left with Charles like that. And the other thing is Jennifer Lawrence. You know what I realized? I did a spoiler-free review without talking about Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique, and Laura and I already recorded our spoiler talk, and we totally forgot to talk about Jennifer Lawrence in our spoiler talk. That's how little of an impact her character's death had on the film. It's how little of an impact her character had in the movie altogether. But now that I've kind of hit the negatives, there's a lot of positives. I loved the action sequences. I mean, I loved it when the military came to Magneto's island and he was using his powers to try to get the helicopter away from Jean, and Jean was using her powers to bring the helicopter down and to make it crash, and it was like that contest of powers. There were a lot of really cool moments with Jean and the Phoenix kind of taking over and those powers like coming out, so a lot of the mutant action sequences were really cool. The New York street fight I thought was a pretty cool scene, especially when Magneto shows up and she rips apart his helmet and throws him out, and then Charles comes in and she melts his chair and she makes him walk up the stairs to him. Like, moments like that I thought were really cool. So I feel like this movie's mixed. It had a lot of great entertainment, it had a lot of great action, and it kind of had a little bit of confusing moments there too. And so it kept this movie from greatness. Number 9, X-Men. That first X-Men movie, I like it. I do. I think it's a good, solid film. But it has never stood out to me as anything special. Even watching the movie in chronological order, it just hasn't stood out in the test of time as this movie is just special to me. It just, to me, I watch it and go, yeah, that's a good movie. But that's not a fantastic movie or a great movie. So I do enjoy it, and I do enjoy it whenever I watch it. It just doesn't stick in my mind as a standout. Number 8, Deadpool 2. Here's a movie that I wanted to like better than I actually liked it, but I just didn't. I still thought the movie was stinking hilarious. I think Ryan Reynolds is absolutely born for that role, and I did like Deadpool 2. But the first time I watched it, I kind of just walked out of it like, it was good, it just wasn't great, and it wasn't as good as the first one. But did I really expect it to be as good as the first one? And so, you know, I kind of just wrote it off like that. And about a week later, my uncle wanted to see it, so we went to see it with him, and I thought I was going to fall asleep. Especially when you get to the end of the movie, and he's dying. Oh, I'm not dead.
Before I go... Oh, it's so hard to go. Oh, that's the sun.
I know it was supposed to be funny, and how long it took him to actually die was kind of supposed to be the joke within the joke. It just bored the snot out of me. It's like, okay, it's not funny. Can we please move on? But there were a lot of things about Deadpool 2 that I did like. Interesting that they killed Vanessa at the very beginning, and then very cool what they did with that, where he tried to kill himself or would kind of die in different moments and find himself in the afterlife, but he couldn't cross over to where she was because his heart wasn't in the right place. And so now the kid Fire Fist becomes that opportunity for him to be a better man and for him to get his heart in the right place. And so I thought that entire plot line was really interesting. Josh Brolin was great in this role. I can't not see Thanos though, and I thought he did way better as Thanos than he did in this role. Not because he did a bad job in this role, but probably because I just like the character of Thanos better. But I thought overall, like, he was a great addition to the cast. There was a lot of stuff in this movie that was hilarious. Like the whole scene where everybody's parachuting down and the whole X-Force dies like one member at a time. Like, that scene is stinking hilarious.
Oh, God. I'm gonna throw up in my mask.
So the movie did have a lot of great moments and a lot of things that I really enjoyed, but it just didn't quite live up for me. Number 7, X2, X-Men United. This one to me is great, and I walked out of the theater thinking, wow, yeah, that was a really good X-Men movie. And I thought that, again, watching it in chronological order is just one of those standout movies that I really, really enjoyed. I like, again, ignoring X-Men Origins Wolverine and just kind of having the mysterious origins of Wolverine and all the stuff that he went through in his mind trying to figure out who he was, where he came from, how did he get the adamantium in his body when he's facing Stryker for the first time in 15, 20 years, however long it was. And so it was interesting the way that triggered that stuff in his mind, and it was slowly coming back to him. I mean, there were so many things about X-Men 2 that I just thought was really, really cool. The way they used Charles Xavier and Stryker's mutant son to get in Charles's mind, to use their makeup Cerebro to try to take out the mutants and all that stuff all around the world. Like, I don't know, there was a lot of action sequences, a lot of story elements, and a lot of things in X2 that I just thought was really good, and it definitely stands out as a solid, awesome X-Men film. X-Men Apocalypse. I like this movie better than a vast majority of people that I've seen on the internet, but I really did think overall it was good, other than Ivan Ooze being the villain. Ooh, yeah, he looks so much like Ivan Ooze, I can't even get past it, but it was a good concept of a villain is what I should say. And there were a lot of scenes with him that I liked. I mean, come on, when Charles puts on Cerebro and he finds Eric and tries to communicate with him, and then Apocalypse catches on to that, uses his power to connect with Charles, and then uses Charles and Cerebro to connect with the rest of the world and shoots all of their nuclear arsenal into space. Like, I enjoyed that entire montage and all of Apocalypse's creepy little speech there.
No more superpowers.
Leading into one of my other favorite scenes where you have Quicksilver and in one of his awesome super fast scenes where everybody's moving super slow and the entire mansion is exploding and he's getting everybody out of there to the awesome music. Like, I love sequences like that. I thought that whole thing was pretty cool. I love Charles's message to the world. Like, this is one of those movies that I think got the character of Charles down really, really good, because here's Apocalypse forcing Charles to deliver this message to the world, and here is Charles facing Apocalypse and ends the message with,
"Those with the greatest power protect those without."
Eric loses his family and then loses his stuff on those cops. The moment where Eric is standing in the concentration camp and Apocalypse teaches him that he can reach down and mess with the metals in the earth and does that first huge, you know, magnetic experience and destroys all the remains of that camp. Like, those emotional moments like that I thought were really good in the movie. The Wolverine. I really like this movie, especially the director's cut. Like, that's the cut that I now watch, because especially that last fight at the very end of the movie, where, not the last fight, but the fight where Wolverine is trying to get to the building where his girl is, and he's trying to get there, and all those ninjas are there stopping him. When you watch that scene in the director's cut R-rated version, it's like 10 times better. And I love the whole World War II backstory and him being there when the atomic bomb went off. Like, all of that was just really smart, and it is a really good movie. I especially love the scene where he cuts open his own chest, reaches in, pulls out that little bug, like pretty much dies on the table, and then suddenly heals and stands up and fights. Gosh dang it, Hugh Jackman is so flippin' good in that role. And I think that is a solid standalone Wolverine movie. Number 4, Deadpool. From the opening credits onward, I thought Deadpool was a pretty hysterical movie. I really enjoyed it. Now, me not having a huge history on Deadpool or knowing tons of stuff about the X-Men, so before this, my only experience with Deadpool was you know, that first solo Wolverine movie. So to get this and see what the character was supposed to be was awesome. And I got really mad at that Wolverine movie. Number one, because of the bad continuity. Number two, how could they take a character like that and ruin it that bad? And Ryan Reynolds is just absolutely born for this role. He is fantastic in it. It's amazing what he did with this role and how much fun he had with it. Number 3, X-Men First Class. I flippin' love First Class. I thought this movie was fantastic. Even though the first X-Men movie ever, there's a line where Charles says he was 17 when he met Eric, and there's no flippin' way he was 17 in the movie First Class when he first met Eric. That just is not the case. That continuity stuff really bugs me, and when it comes to X-Men, you just gotta take it with a grain of salt. But salt in a wound hurts, and it really, really bugs me. The throwaway lines and nonsensical continuity. My gosh, did nobody write a Bible about what they're doing in these movies and write down stuff so that they could do things within the continuity? Awesome to see Charles and Eric meet for the first time. I love the whole concept where Eric is trying to get vengeance, and there's Charles finding the best in him, saying you'll never find peace with that. Even going so far as to find the brightest point in his memory and pulling up that memory of Eric and his mom to show him that when his power comes from that place of like peace and serenity, it's more powerful and it's stronger than his rage and his need for vengeance. I mean, this is one of those movies where you really get into the heart of Charles and you really see the hope that exists inside of him. The action in this movie is really cool. The ending is really cool, even though Eric paralyzes him at the end of this movie and he's walking in X-Men The Last Stand to go to, you know, Jean and bring her to the school. Now, you could explain that away and say it was the serum that took away his powers, and maybe he came up with a mixture where he can maintain his powers and walk, but then why didn't he just keep maintaining that mixture afterwards? Number 2, X-Men Days of Future Past. Love it. I absolutely love this movie. And if you're gonna soft reboot your franchise, this one figured it out and did it in the best way possible. And watching in chronological order, I decided after watching the theatrical cut, I'd never seen the road cut. So I bought it and I watched it. The road cut has some amazing stuff, like that entire sequence where you have Eric Lyncher and he's getting his helmet back. It gets interspersed with what's going on in, like, what is it, 2023 or whatever the year it takes place in, and interspersing it with Eric breaking into the mansion to save Rogue, who's being experimented on in Cerebro. So it was a really cool scene the way they took it and they mixed it together. So, like, you don't get a lot of road cut differences until you get towards, like, the latter half of the movie. But I think some of those differences are awesome and it amplifies the intensity of some of those scenes. And so I think the road cut kind of adds a little extra oomph to it. It's not like drastic, but it does add something extra, and I really did enjoy the road cut. Awesome to see how Charles, somebody with that much hope, could lose their way. I feel like they did that character arc of Charles far better in that movie than they did in Dark Phoenix. We see him lose his hope, we see him regain his hope, and we feel that as the movie progresses. Number 1, Logan. What can I say about Logan? It's a flippin' masterpiece. I think most people agree it's a flippin' masterpiece. It makes me so happy that Hugh Jackman did not pop up in Dark Phoenix anywhere, because, you know, that's the swan song. That's the goodbye. That's Hugh Jackman saying goodbye to the character. It's Patrick Stewart saying goodbye to Charles, and it was just one of the best ways to end this entire thing. So as much as Dark Phoenix is indeed the most recent movie coming out chronologically, Logan is the last one, and it definitely deserves to be that finale. Because even though we don't even see what happens to the rest of the X-Men and Charles just kind of mentions it, still you get the idea of what happened and why those mutants are gone. You get the idea of why mutants are disappearing, and it was a fantastic way to end the entire series. So, love Logan, flippin' amazing movie. How would you rank all 12 of these movies? Let's do that in the comments. While you're there, hit that subscribe button to become a Durbanian. Hit the bell by the subscribe button so you're notified when I drop my spoiler talk. My wife Laura is going to join me to spoiler talk Dark Phoenix, so hit the bell so you'll be notified when that drops, and when other movie reviews, ranking videos, theological analyses, and trailer reactions drop, you'll be notified. I'm Durbin. Thanks for checking out Durbania.